Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Best our Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, USA Today's NFL Wire site that covers, of course, your Arizona Cardinals. Recording episode 760 with Seth Cox, my co-host from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site, as we have our second free agent reaction show of the week as the Cardinals continue to make moves. We discussed earlier in the week their initial moves where they got Gardner Minshew, Isaac Seumalo, Roy Lopez, Tyler Algier. Those guys have been and Algier is being introduced to the media. I think like right now, it's all those good vibes and Roy Lopez is jacked up is amped up to be here. Seumalo apparently bought a house in Gilbert like 2 months ago, and now he's here. They're talking about, playing for a team that wants to win. We laugh at that, but there have been some other moves that have come through, and there were actually two free agent additions that somehow did not get reported. The Cardinals announced them before that, but we have a couple of moves on the offensive line. We have a couple of moves on defense that came across, and from there we've got some players that are returning, and then we're going to talk about what do they still need and what their grades what are we going to grade them, maybe not individually, but do they have any A grades, do you have any B grades, such and that. But let's start with the offensive line. Now, when we recorded a couple of days ago, the news came during our show that the Cardinals were signing Matt Pryor to a 1-year deal. The initial response across the media members, guys that cover the Cardinals, there's your right tackle. And we were like, wait a minute, maybe it's going to be a guard because he started, 25 of his 40 starts come with guard. He started 15 games at right guard for the Bears in 2024. We are now here to tell you, chill out on the Matt Pryor deal because it is a 1-year veteran minimum salary, which means there is no expectation for him. And the equivalent is, I think it happened when we were on this show, when we were recording this week a year ago, when the Cardinals signed tackle Jake Curhan, and we were talking about the exact same thing because he'd had some starts at tackle, he'd had some starts at guard, and we're like, well, what's his role going to be? Turned out it was literally nothing. He was on the practice squad briefly and got signed elsewhere, but there were no plans for Jake Curran, and it appears that Matt Pryor, at best, is a back of the roster offensive lineman who is not going to sniff the starting lineup unless things go awry again this year.
Yeah, and I mean that makes sense. This is a guy that's not been great at anywhere. He's been a career backup, and those guys are incredibly important. And
yes,
having somebody like Pryor that has played at any level, yet and we don't have to say at a high level, but has played, competent football.
Played in the NFL, which means they're good football players, just maybe not great NFL players.
But he's also started at 4 of the 5 offensive line positions. So he is a super sub. He can play all the positions. And ideally, he's just the backup. And like you said, maybe he doesn't even make the roster depending on how draft picks and late free agency plays out. But for now, he's a serviceable piece that they can pivot to if Isaiah Adams doesn't work out or Elijah Wilkinson gets hurt like he did the last time he was in Arizona, right?
Yes. Which brings us to the second offensive line move that actually feels like a plan for the starting lineup, and that is the return of Elijah Wilkinson on a 2-year deal, which Interesting. That's one of the moves that did not get reported. After he had played at Atlanta, like he's bounced around the NFL, 4 years in Denver, a year in Chicago. He was spent a year in Atlanta in 2022, where he was kind of a backup guy, but started 9 games at left guard. Came to Arizona and was their starting left guard, but got hurt. He started 9 games at left guard. He left, went back to Atlanta in 2024, kind of practice squad game. And then last year, he was their starting right tackle for all 17 games. And so if we are looking for like the Cardinals move for right tackle, you might not like it, but it appears that Elijah Wilkinson is that move. But in terms of whether that's going to be the plan for the regular season, since it is a 2-year contract, we'll get numbers here, not today, but coming up in the next few days. When they sign him to 2-year deal, that should signal they intend for him to be in their plans, probably in the starting lineup. Now, because he is experienced at both tackle and guard, if they decide to draft a tackle in round 1 or round 2 and play that guy, Elijah Wilkinson can easily slide over to right guard. And so in terms of that sort of move, in terms of depth on the roster on the offensive line, it's a good move. Is that the move we want to see the Cardinals make at right tackle? Probably not, because we saw him play a couple of years ago and it was not inspiring, but he is a capable starting right tackle. He started 12 games for Denver in 2019 at right tackle. He started every game last year at right tackle. So I guess, I mean, can he be markedly worse than what is it, 15 games of Jonah Williams over 2 years?
Yeah, and that's kind of what the idea is behind, maybe Elijah Wilkinson, right? I know in Arizona he had the 1 year where he got hurt, right? But he only played in 10 games, started 9. But outside of that, he's had a lot of starts. Again, a lot of the decisions specifically along the offensive line don't make a ton of sense to me just based on age. I mean, you've got obviously your young left tackle, but then you bring in a 33-year-old left guard who's phenomenal. I don't think I can understate how good he is. You have a currently signed 30-year-old center. You have a question mark 25-year-old right guard, and then you bring in a 31-year-old kind of journeymanish right tackle. Like you basically are saying that this is a short-term fix to a long-term issue. Now, if Isaiah Adams turns out or Josh Fryer turns out, that's great. But you're looking at Fryer as anything when he was a 6th or 7th round pick. I don't remember off the top of my head. Like that, or no, he was an undrafted free agent, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
And so like if you get anything out of Fryer, that's a great, that's just basically what they've gotten out of Fryer is more than you should expect, right? And so this is what the question becomes. It's not that the moves are bad. They're not. I just want to stress that enough. It just nothing makes sense in the cohesion of things. Like it was almost like they thought, well, we're way too young, so let's get some veterans in here. And then it was like, okay, we've got veterans, and you're like, whoa, like a veteran's like a 28-year-old, not a 33-year-old. But again, the players aren't bad, specifically Siamulu. It's just an interesting way to go about it, looking at what they've done.
I guess if we can look at it this, we can now kind of project the Cardinals starting offensive line to look like this: Paris Johnson, Isaac Seumalo, Yilda Froholt, probably Evan Brown, and Elijah Wilkinson. I'm guessing Evan Brown still projects as a starter. That's how I would view it. So whether it's Evan at left guard, Seumalo at right guard, or flip-flopped. You have yourself the most mid offensive line you could put together with a talented left tackle that you can probably come up with, because none of that, I wouldn't say any of those guys would be considered bad. Like Seumalo's good, Paris Johnson's good, Froholt's fine, Brown is fine, and Wilkinson is passable. So they have the most mid offensive line you could come up with, based on what we've seen this offseason, at least for now. And I guess mid is better than dumpster fire.
Yeah, and then again, that's what you're looking at.
But let's move on. We've got more to talk about coming next on the Rest of Your podcast of our Cardinals Talk on the Web. We've got some moves on the defensive side of the ball that they've made. That's coming up next on Rise Up Sea Red. We're back on the Rise Up Sea Red podcast of our Cardinals Talk on the Web. The Cardinals made a pair of defensive moves, one that was reported, one that the Cardinals announced themselves. And one, this is funny because we get Jonah Williams in 2026 for the Cardinals. That is not the tackle. Well, not the offensive tackle, Jonah Williams, but rather the defensive tackle, Jonah Williams, whom the Cardinals tried to sign a year ago. They signed him to a 2-year deal on the defensive line. And they also, this was reported on Wednesday, they are adding veteran safety Andrew Wingard from the Jacksonville Jaguars to a 1-year deal worth $3 to $4 million. Guy who started all 17 games. He's been full-time starter, like playing almost 1,000 snaps like last year, and he's been a depth guy and 300 plus snap special teams guy. So he gives them a little bit of versatility. But what do you think of these two additions? Oh, guess what? Evan Brown is gone. They have so no Evan Brown. I just ran across that on Twitter. So forget what we said about Evan Brown on the offensive line. They are releasing Brown. So Seumalo on the right, at left guard. Elijah Wilkinson or Isaiah Adams at right guard, and maybe Elijah Wilkinson or a rookie at right tackle. There it is. Okay, Evan Brown gone.
Yeah, and this is, one of those situations where you get guys that are, back end of the roster rotation type of guys. I mean, you mentioned the prior Jonah Williams. I mean, right now he makes the roster because your options are super limited, and we don't even know what the status of Walter Nolan still is. But, if Nolan's healthy coming into camp and they hopefully add another piece, it's just, it doesn't move the needle, right? Let's just be honest.
Oh, he's a 30-year-old veteran who plays. Now, last year, he played in 15 games, had a career high 3 sacks, career high 5 tackles for loss and 5 quarterback hits. But we're going to assume that this is a moderate, kind of probably like a Roy Lopez deal. He's been up and down. Like, he was a part-timer for the Rams. He ended up being pretty much a full-time starter in 2023. He played for 3 different teams in 2024, the Rams, Lions, and Vikings, and then signed with the New Orleans last year. And so he is a guy. He's a guy who can do things, but isn't like he's your perfect number 5 defensive lineman in your rotation, hopefully.
Yeah, and like you said, hopefully, right? And then the addition of Andrew Wingard's a really interesting one. Long time veteran. Now, he has not been official yet, right? Like, I know it's official, but the team has not announced him yet, correct?
Wingard? Or yeah. It's been reported, but not announced yet.
What's interesting about Wingard is you're talking about a guy that has been mostly okay in his career. He's going to be 30 this year. He was an undrafted free agent out of Wyoming, right? And when you look at him and what he's done, as a player, you've got a lot of different things. He's taken most of his snaps at free safety. Last year he played over 1,000 snaps. Let's just look at him just on defense, no special teams. Hold on, sorry about
It was
that.
961 on defense last year.
And 544 were at free safety. So a little over 50% of his snaps at free safety. But here's the thing, the other like 25% of the snaps were in the box. He's rarely used as like a cover guy, right? So he's either in the box playing physical as a very, very good run tackler. I don't want to understate how good he is as a run defender, or playing that center field role. He didn't play a lot. I don't know if it was injury or not. I'd have to look back in 2024. In 2023, again, didn't play a ton, 330 defensive snaps. And that was a closer split between free and box safety. So he's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none type of guy. Ironically, and maybe this is why he had his worst coverage season by the statistics, it's because it was the first time he played free safety for the majority of his time, right? Had his worst coverage season as a player this year. And like I said, maybe that is because that was when he finally played over 50+% of his snaps as a free. He's a rock solid run defender. I mean, you literally can't take that away from him. Another guy that's missed a lot of tackles. I think that I genuinely think typically, especially with DBs, it's hard to tackle. It is just.
Yeah, I guess that's the one thing that we kind of overlooked. And one thing Vance Joseph, when he was defensive coordinator here, what he loved about Jason Thompson, really good tackler. When Jalen Thompson was on the field, what could have been a 40 or 60-yard play, because of how he plays out there, it's a 15-yard play. And we noticed that the times that he was missing. Interestingly, it isn't, aside from the hair, Andrew Wingard, kind of his career arc has been very much kind of like Dennis Gardeck, but as a defensive back, right? A guy that was special teamer, excelled a little bit in a starting role, went back to special teams, and then developed into kind of the starter. Dennis Gardeck. And interesting, if he had struggled a bit, but also that Jaguars defense was dang good last year, and so I wonder if they're looking for some of that element. And we talked about it. I do like that he's a bigger framed guy to replace Thompson, rather than having both Rabbit and Buddha, who are the two smallest guys on the field, having to play the back end. Now, the question is going to be, and as people have suggested, is that Rabbit would still be the starter. I'm not so sure. I bet that the plan is Wingard to start with Buddha, with Rabbit still kind of, since we got the same defense in Nick Rallis, I bet we're going to see a lot of three safety looks, and that Wingard will be on the field more than Rabbit, I would bet.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that statement. Now, doesn't mean it's going to happen, but I just think that you're looking at a guy that's got more experience, has more success, is, like you said, a bigger frame guy. One of the things that we talked about with Rabbit is the style of play is one that you love, but the body is not necessarily.
And having one guy like that on the field, okay, but two guys with the exact same build,
yeah, it makes it a little difficult. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm interested to see how it all turns out, but I do like the addition. But it would definitely be interesting if uh if they end up pushing another draft pick, down, right?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how yeah. Let's keep those draft picks from playing. Or maybe they saw them play enough and they're like, we don't want to count on them. So let's not count on them. So, man, there it is. Evan Brown released. It's going to save about $5 million in cap space, and that clears up a roster spot. And what's going to happen to right guard now? Yeah. Coming up next on the Res of Seaward podcast, Mr. Cardinals talk on the web. Let's talk about the guys they brought back. One other guy that they brought in that's new, and go from there. That's coming next on Rise of Sea Red. We're back on the Rise of Seaward podcast, Mr. Cardinals talk on the web. One newcomer that is worth just mentioning, and it would be that the Cardinals, that after 10 seasons as the Cardinals long snapper, Aaron Brewer is now no longer the Cardinals long snapper, as they signed Casey Kreider, who's been in the league not as long, who's nearly as old as Brewer. Brewer's going to turn 36 in July. Kreider's going to turn 36 in August, but what is it? The Kreider's played 4 fewer seasons than Brewer, but I'm assuming Brewer is going to retire because and they're bringing in Kreider, although he was the long snapper for the Giants for the last 6 seasons, where new Cardinals special teams coordinator Michael Gobriel was at, and so there you get that new connection, that familiarity, which makes sense. After all, when Aaron Brewer became the guy, well, he didn't have ties to, but when Jeff Rogers came over, Aaron Brewer was a guy, and they knew each other from Denver before. And so, interesting enough, Kreider was Brewer's replacement in Denver after that. But so he now becomes Brewer's replacement for the second time. One interesting thing, Kreider's been to a Pro Bowl. Not that I know how that. I always find long snapper Pro Bowlers or all pros. I'm like, how and how do you know who's good?
Right.
Especially as a voter on some awards, like how do you know who's good as a long snapper? Because they're kind of all fine, and then the ones who aren't, they get cut.
Right, exactly. And so that's what's so funny about the whole situation is you're like, well, as long as they do a good job, and for Casey Kreider, that's the big deal, right? You mentioned the Pro Bowl, no, and without sounding like a jerk, literally nobody cares.
What I know, but we have a one-time Pro Bowl long snapper. I don't think the Cardinals have ever had a Pro Bowl long snapper.
But what they do care about is this is a guy that's consistently been good for a decade. I mean, 10 years. He's played in 159 games. Had over 1,300 snaps. Like, this is a guy that's a good long snapper, and that's literally all that matters. Nothing else.
It's just you only notice when they're not good, and from there. But they also re-signed several, or agreed to re-sign several of their players. Bam Knight is coming back. We already mentioned they've got their kicker and punter. So Chad Ryland, Blake Gillikin come back. Woohoo! Yay! They're back. PJ Mustipher re-signed as an exclusive rights free agent. Kicker Joshua Carty is back. Bam Knight is back, and then cornerback Star Thomas. And so only two of their exclusive rights and restricted free agents did they neither tender nor re-sign. Amari DiMercado, they let him go. And also tight end Travis Vokolek, although I would guess that the Vokolek not being re-signed has more to do with the fact about his health, as he went down with that scary neck injury in week 5. Because otherwise, why wouldn't you bring back a guy that you have just complete rights over, and he's a fine number 4 tight end on your roster? So I'm guessing he's probably not well yet in terms of football, and maybe we'll see him later. But Bam, Star Thomas, PJ Mustipher, Joshua Carty. What do you say about those returners?
Nothing. I mean, I am excited to see Star Thomas back and healthy because that dude is just effort so much, and I love what he brings from that. Guys like that, you want guys like that on your team. You know that they're not the best players, and you're okay with it, right? Like that, and you're okay with it. You just want to watch these guys, you know, play at a high level for as long as they can because that's really all that they offer. So, uh, from that perspective, outside of that, I mean, PJ Mustipher is a guy. I mean, he had a decent little season last year. He's nice depth for this team. I mean, the PJ Mustipher Jonah Williams battle in free agent or in the preseason is going to be just brilliant to watch, right?
But it's the depth on the roster is starting to take shape. It's interesting because the Cardinals are bringing back Sean Murphy-Bunting. They're bringing back Star Thomas. You've got Keitrell Clark under contract for one more season. You got Will Johnson, Max Melton, Denzel Burke, and then Garrett Williams, who's going to be out indefinitely with his Achilles tear. It appears the Cardinals are 100% okay with the group of cornerbacks that they currently have. Basically, they're basically going with what their plan was last year plus their draft picks. Now, they seem to draft cornerbacks every single year, so I wouldn't be surprised if they added another one. But I think at this point, I'd be surprised if they added anyone of note in free agency.
Yeah, I mean, right at this point, who of note would even be available? I mean, you and I are not. I definitely tuned into every viable free agent, but at the same time too, we do typically know the top guys, right? And the reality is that this
Trayvon Diggs, man,
yeah,
they're old. You got Marshawn Lattimore. There's some names out there, but if you want a slot guy, Cater Cahu, but he might be true. Yeah, the list here is unremarkable. I mean, a couple of names with connection. Roger McCreary, Jeff Okuda. What a weird career he's had. Marco Wilson found himself a job. He's signing with the Miami Dolphins. Igbenigany is a name. Cam Taylor Britt. So there's some names out there, but honestly, I would be surprised if anyone, if they make any significant move in free agency at cornerback at this point.
Yep, I agree with you.
And then Bam Knight. So it appears that in the choice between Bam Knight and Amari DiMercato, I think that was just interesting because of what DiMercato did over 3 seasons. I'd say, like, I don't know, that one's did the one play, or maybe 2, because he had the drop against San Francisco, but did that fumble at the end zone really sour the team that much that they wouldn't? Now, I understand why you wouldn't tender it, because that's $3.5 million for a third down back. And I wonder if it is as much about DiMercato not wanting to return to Arizona as it is about the Cardinals not wanting DiMercato back. But that's an interesting, because for a guy that was, except for one play, really was excellent in the role that he had. That's exactly. A bummer. That's the one player that I sort of lament. Now, Bam Knight's fine. He's got, I think, probably a little more upside, but at the end of the year, he only had 3.3 yards per carry. And DiMercato gives you some return ability. He's explosive. He is explosive in the run game. Great pass blocker. He can catch the ball. He gives you specialty. And I'm puzzled by that move, honestly. And unless they're going to go get a guy like Ronnie Rivers, who is that guy for the Rams the last couple of years, that's the one I'm actually kind of disappointed in.
Yeah, and I'm kind of looking at guards. There's still some interesting guards available, veteran guards, but it feels like they've done that. Yeah, I mean, I just don't see a whole lot of other like moves that they're going to make um, at this point because the available options are either redundant or old, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And well, with that, coming next on the Rise Up Seared podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. What is left for the Cardinals to do, and what grades? We're back at Rise Up Seared podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. The Cardinals have made some moves. We're going to look at what they've addressed, what they still need to do, and then we're going to talk grades. I don't think we're going to. I think instead of grading every move, we'll go any A grades, any B grades, things like that. So they've addressed quarterback, got Gardner Minshew. They've addressed running back Tyler Algier, and they've brought back Bam Knight. They've addressed the offensive line, both guard and tackle, Elijah Wilkinson and Isaac Siamalu. They had added the defensive line. They added Jonah Williams. They added Roy Lopez. They brought back LG Collier. Nothing at linebacker. Uh, Honestly, nothing at cornerback, as it's just returning guys. And it's safety Andrew Wingard with your returners, with your specialists coming back, except with a new long snapper. With what the Cardinals have done, where are their greatest like positional needs still that probably should be addressed in free agency for you?
Well, I mean, the obvious one's quarterback, but it's that ship has sailed, right? Unless you're going to go get a Kirk
Gardner
Cousins.
Minshew's the answer, man. Gardner Minshew's the answer.
Unless you're going
He's
to
my
go
QB1. He's my QB1 this year. I don't like it. And I ran across it like Gardner Minshew is hilarious. And so, if for anything else, to have him be the starter so he can be the one in press conferences, that would be glorious. But yes, yeah, you hope that the Cardinals have not finished addressing the quarterback position, but we know they are, at least maybe the draft. But Gardner Minshew, Jacoby Brissett, that's exciting. That's no.
I would say like out of things that they haven't done, the like two that stand out are edge and off ball linebacker, right? Like
yes.
you've brought up the Josh Sweat thing. Whether or not the rumor of him requesting a trade is true is neither here nor there, because I don't think it's going to happen. So they've got to get somebody that's going to take some pressure off of Sweat. Maybe that's where they're going in the first round, so they're not really worried about it. And then on the flip side, you've got Mac Wilson, who's coming off an injury. And then you've got Cody Simon, who, understandably had a ineffective first season as a fourth round rookie.
But once he was put in the starting lineup, once he was the starter instead of Mac Wilson, that is when the defense took a turn for the worse.
Yeah, and they've already gotten rid of Akeem Davis Gaither, and so there's a lot of a lot of reality that they need to improve in that position. Would you not agree?
100%. And the names that we kind of liked, neither one of them really emerged as possibilities, like Nakobe Dean, past what was the Leo Chanel.
Yeah.
They have shown zero interest in the guys that are on the market at this point. And what's left are guys that you probably are not wanting to bring in anyway. An old Zach Cunningham, even Isaiah Adams is going back. Chris Barnes was here a few years ago. But yeah, the names that are left, because it's become apparent that they are counting on, at least initially, that for their starters to be Mac and Cody Simon, which that's you can certainly go that way. There's Logan Wilson available. You can get a really, 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 really old Levante David, or really, 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 really old Bobby Wagner. And Kenneth Murray's available, but like he's not been, he's been a tackler, but he hasn't been particularly good. There's not really any good options, and I guess you could say the edge as well. But I'm thinking the same thing as well with the players at the top of the draft, where you get David Bailey, Arvell Reese, Ruben Bain. that's likely going to be your focus in round one, even though everyone keeps saying, well, pencil and tackle. I don't know. Like, here's my take as we get close to the draft. My take is on that first round pick, that number 3 pick, that while they need a good tackle, I don't know if I want to take a guy that's you see as a right tackle and not a left tackle, 3rd overall, unless you see him potentially moving over to the left side when you could have an impactful pass rusher there, because you could get a solid right tackle in rounds 2 or 3, and to go with which is like an only right tackle at 3rd overall, to me feels like you're forcing a pick to me.
Yeah, and that's the reality. And like we said, they need that help along the edge. So getting an edge in the draft, Reuben Bain, David Bailey, whoever they grade the highest, would be a win for this team. So you've got those positions. We talked about the corner. They probably need an outside guy, but we know they're not going to, right? Like it's not going to happen. So what is one move that they can still make that you would be like, oh, that's an upgrade? Is it getting an offensive lineman still, like one solid guy, as opposed to Pryor and Elijah Wilkinson?
If they went out and got Jawan Taylor, as many problems as you have with him, I think it would feel. I think Jawan Taylor is the only guy, maybe Rod Havenstein, and again, old. There's some tackles out there you could go, okay, you feel good about that, and then you've got Wilkinson that you can push inside. I think that's about it. Probably the pass, like the edge, the corner guys. There isn't anyone that I would be like, oh yeah. I think right tackle is probably the only position where the Cardinals could go get a guy and you'd feel like, oh yeah, that's a much better plan.
Yeah, and so you mentioned it, it's hard to look at anything and see it as anything less than like, hey, they've done something, right?
They've done something. Woo! Yeah, let's talk grades. Let's talk grades. And so,
oh man,
let's first say this. Let's take this out of the way. Is there any move that you would give an A grade to yet? I can honestly say I think the closest thing you can do, like their closest one, is Isaac Seumalo, and that's not an A to me.
Yeah, I think the closest one is Seumalo. I'm okay with it. I would give it a B plus, and the only reason we've talked about it ad nauseum, the reason it's not an A is because he's 33. Everything else about him is more than ideal, but getting a 33-year-old veteran, I don't even care about the money, $11 million a year, whatever. It's fine. Getting a 33-year-old veteran with really nothing behind him in terms of quarterback, like that's just, it doesn't make sense. If you had, like I said, if you had a Caleb Williams, if you had a Drake May, if you had one of those guys, and that's what you did, it makes sense because you're in that window, right, where you can overpay for a veteran guard because you have a cost-controlled young quarterback. But for a Jacoby Brissett or Gardner Minshew, you're getting his quote unquote best year with Brissett and Minshew. From there, I would say two other B grades would be Tyler Algier and Roy Lopez. I think
so. Those are perfect B grades. Seumalo, Lopez, as well Algier. I like those moves. Those are good players at positions, but they're not spectacular. So yeah, if they had a solid roster already, you'd feel really good about those signings, right?
Correct. Um,
What about
the next question is like, how would you grade Kendrick Bourne? Like,
I think that's a very I think for me, that's where we get to the C grades. He's a mid guy. He's a solid guy, but there's nothing spectacular. Like, what are you going to get out of Kendrick Bourne? And especially when you look at the offense, like he's a number 3 receiver. He's a good player to have. I see Gardner Minshew as just a C addition. Because I like Minshew. Do I like him at 8 million or 5 or 6 million to 8 million as a backup? But I see Minshew. Honestly, and I think I'm being optimistic. Maybe it's because I'd want to see Minshew start, but I think Kendrick Bourne is a C move. I think Elijah Wilkinson is a C move. Jonah Williams is a C move, and Andrew Wingard, Andrew Wingard is a C move. Pretty much all the other moves have been C moves. There's no moves that I look at as why the heck did they do that? And Gardner Minshew came out of left field, except for I like Gardner Minshew, the quarterback. So you might some of people might grade that addition as an F or a D. I like Gardner Minshew, the quarterback. I think that's everything else the Cardinals have done has been perfectly mid, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
What about bringing guys back? So Bam Knight, Star Thomas, any of the guys that they brought back, kickers, punters, re-sign, any of those guys move the needle for you at all?
I mean, move the needle. No, I mentioned I really like Star Thomas, but he's just a guy, right? Like that's part of it. So it'll just be based on those type of things, right? Like how
Thomas and Collier are nice additions, but everyone else is kind of. I guess we can give this free agent class probably a solid C plus. I'm guessing.
Correct. I would say that's accurate.
Which means when you take a bad team and you give them a C plus free agent grade, what you don't have is a competing team. Sorry, guys. Well, they want to win now. They're not going to win now. And yeah, which brings us to the question. It seems obvious that the tank job is on, but you're going to waste another year of Budda Baker's career. You're going to waste another year of Trey McBride's career on this year. And that's disappointing. That's disappointing. It's probably the best way to go. And they can't say that they're trying to rebuild. So they're trying to compete now because you can't tell those guys in the locker room. You have to convince the guys in the locker room that they're doing their best to put a competitive roster together because you need those guys to buy in. And that's hard to do. That's hard to do when you don't move the needle on some moves, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And with that, we will wrap up this edition of the Rise Up Sierra podcast, the Bizarre Cardinals talk on the web. We'll see what we have in store for y'all next week. We'll probably have one show as we will start with probably for free agency moves, and we can start delving a little bit into the draft as we've got weeks before that. But until then, that's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening as always. We'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.
Roll!